Today we have with us business development coach Lenora Edwards. Lenora and I had a chance meeting at a social gathering. You see, we meet people all the time, but it's rarely do we connect with someone at a deep level. With her, I instantaneously connected. And there were so many things which just stood out to me. She listened deeply. She was interested in me. She was actively thinking of how can she help me solve a problem. I brought up a challenge. And by the time I had left, she had given me two names to connect with. And I connected with them, and voila, I made progress. So, another thing that happened during this process is that I recognized that I want to bring her to the Mindful Leader Practices podcast because what she was demonstrating was mindfulness. So I reached out to her and I said, Lenora, would you come and be on our show? Be at the Mindful Leader Practices podcast. And she said, yes. And there she is today. Welcome, Lenora, and really, really glad to have you over. You are a business development coach and really excited. This is our first time interviewing a business development coach. And so I am really, really excited about that fact too. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me here. It's very fun. I feel so invited and warm to be in your presence on this special show. And just like I did that evening when we met at dinner, it was just the perfect conversation, and getting to know you, I'll never forget
it. Thanks, Lenora. And I know I introduced you as a business development coach, but there's more to that. So I'd like you to take it from there on what does it mean? And the question I actually want to explore with you is this. I just saw so much joy in you doing this work. So that's what's been more intriguing to me. What brings you so much joy in the work you do? So what is it and what brings you so much joy?
All right. Well, it's business development consulting for entrepreneurs. And so half of my practice are people who are solo entrepreneurs and getting started and growing their practice, usually consulting. The other half are CEOs who already have an existing practice. They may have a team where they want me to work with them on business development. And so I can either be working with the CEO and a few key people or a solo entrepreneur. And both are really fun for me to do because I enjoy teaching. I enjoy showing people that sales isn't a terrible thing that they have to dread, that it's all about creating relationships and also expanding their practice of and doing what they're expert at doing. It's a very interesting puzzle that I work with my clients because they never come to me and say, oh, I want to grow at all costs. They say, I have this practice and I want to be with my clients in a certain way. I want to deliver these services in a special way that is a recipe only I have. And I also want to have personal margin. So I always talk to them about profit margin and personal margin so that they have time to have the flexibility they want to have, and a flexibility they've earned because they've taken on having a business. And the reason it gives me so much joy is that it's so meaningful. It's meaningful to my clients and therefore meaningful to me. So I enjoy helping them put together that puzzle and get the revenue they want and also the kind of lifestyle they want to have that involves lots of flexibility to be with their families and take the time to have other interests besides what they do in their business. So it's always a fun and interesting combination. My clients have had a lot of business background, usually in the corporate world. So they're clear about what they don't want to do because they've had some opportunities to try out things that weren't really their thing. And then they're super clear on what they want to do. So I enjoy that. There's another thing that makes me so happy to do this work. And it's because I know it makes a difference on a big scale. There's a quote, and I have it's something I refer to all the time. John Battelle of Wired magazine in April of 2016 said, business is humanity's most resilient, iterative, and productive mechanism for creating change in the world. So I feel like I'm helping my clients bring around positive change And since it is in the business world, it is a big, resilient, iterative, and productive mechanism for us to all do it in. So I just get so much out of working in this because there's the game side of it, which is make the numbers work. And then there's the whole qualitative, emotional side of it, which is make this work for me, meaning my clients. And that's my job.
And I love what you're saying. You are driven by the holistic approach to this. It's not just about numbers. It's you talked a few things which just like deeply resonated with me. One was the not just professional margin, but the personal margin. What are the personal trade-offs I'm willing to make, and what are the trade-offs I'm not willing to make? You know, these are or the values which I want to build my business upon. So bringing both of them in, I wonder, is that what you were alluding to when you said personal margin? Because
Yes, definitely. And I love that you use the word values because that is what it's about. Because I ask my clients to do their 10 business saving commandments. And I say, these are your 10 requirements that allow you to deliver your best work. And so it has things in there about their values, about the kind of people they want to work with, or the kinds of projects they want to be involved in, or industries they would like to stay away from, even the quality of their day. About, like, for me, one of mine is about having natural light when I work. Like, it's really important to me not to be under a fluorescent light like I was in the corporate world. I found it difficult to concentrate, so I have to have a window and some nature peeking in here to add to my joy. So those things, those are the values that help us thrive in our lives, not just our businesses.
And you know, the other thing I'd like to highlight is because you bring your own, you're very clear on your own values and you are living them and you're practicing them, and then you are able to bring that into your clients' lives. So you're also walking that talk, or
That's
how?
true. And this is something sometimes when my clients are feeling bad that, like, I'm not so enthusiastic about this proposal I'm writing or something. I'll go, well, what's going on here? Maybe it violates one of your tenets for doing your best work, and your best work is highly remarkable, referable work. And maybe there's just not enough oomph to it or meaning, and that's why you're not excited. Maybe we need to pass on it and do the next thing that's probably standing right behind it, and we wouldn't see it if we got busy doing something that didn't give us some joy, right?
Uh, there's something else that you said which kind of is also, you know, a challenge for me, that the big bad world of sales.
Yeah.
It has been a continuous challenge for me. And so when you said that, I'm like, yeah. No, I also think of it like that. That's something to be dreaded upon, kept at bay. And somehow magically people will discover me and they'll see how brilliant I am, and my coaching business will on its own take off. So and there's nothing like that, right? There's no such thing as that kind of magic. For magic also, we know that we have to do the work.
Yes. But the work that you do to support and bring the magic can be something that makes you happy. In other words, I have noticed that all my clients, since my business is referral, they tend to be very relationship based. And so all of you, all of them, everybody knows each other. And when they meet up at a social gathering, we had one a few weeks ago, they'll say, wow, I just met so many people who are my people. And I'm like, well, remember, you all introduced me. Go through each other, and so these shared values are intertwined.
Yeah.
And that's why it all works. And also the idea that, oh my goodness, please don't make me do hard selling and make me feel like a used car salesman. It's like, no, just like you enjoy relationships, you can enjoy relationships with really good referral partners. And together with your complementary referral partners, you're all building a community where there's some overlap, and it makes sense for you to refer. Like today, I just referred somebody. I heard from somebody I used to work with a long time ago. The employee of one of my CEO clients reached out to me. I mean, it's probably been 10 years since I worked with her. And she said, I have a friend who has a special need in her career as far as how she wants to transition. Who do you know? And so I, could give her a list of names, and there we go. It's just like a big wheel.
Generosity goes a long way, isn't it?
Yes, it does.
So, Lenora, you and I talked a little bit about it, and because it's not a really comfortable place for a lot of, especially coaches I know,
Mhm.
to do sales or. So I thought, why don't we do a little demo and experiment on the show itself, where if I brought a business challenge, do you want to
Mhm.
play with it? And as a business development consultant and coach, um, you walk me through the process. Would it be
I'd love
something
to.
you'd be willing to
Yeah,
play?
let's do it.
Okay. So, as you are aware, am an executive coach. I do facilitation, I do speaking, I also do team coaching.
Mhm.
Now, my biggest challenge is, I keep adding on these things. As I get excited about, team coaching. For example, I did team coaching like about 5 years ago when I first did my first team coaching. I'm like, this is a great place where I want to expand even more.
Mm.
So, but in this process, nothing gives way. So now I have this, my portfolio is like all these things which have added on in the last 5 years. And I don't have a kind of a signature offering left anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I wonder if, it's my scenario, we take mine and, you help me walk through this and see what you want to know. Do you think this would be a good case? Otherwise, we can create a hypothetical case also.
This sounds like a great case because it is something that a lot of coaches and consultants run into because they're very curious nature and lifelong learner tendencies. They will, as you will, collect different ways, different practices within the practice. And I think there's some confusion. I think sometimes what can look like, oh, I have all these little practices, and when you add it all up, it's this big portfolio that may not make sense to somebody on the outside. Or it's like a retail store with lots of departments. And how do I get people in all these different departments, right? But there's a subtle thing that goes on as you're collecting these modes, these ways of delivering results. Those are tools.
Hmm.
So those are, hammers and screwdrivers and saws and rulers, things like that. But that you got, if you focus on what the end result is of using those tools and why you like to use them, that helps you come up with an overall value proposition that then looks like one cohesive business. And what the client prospects and clients need to know is, I get results, and those results are called X. And I'm going to ask you about that in a moment. And how I can get at it is by using these tools,
Hmm.
and you can engage with me in these ways. So we're talking about the difference between the what and the how.
Hmm.
So then
Hmm.
my question for you is, when you there's something drawing you to these different tools and ways you can practice, and you're helping people get what at the end.
So one of the reasons why I got into coaching was where I could see the impact of clients' ahas in the
Mm-hmm.
moment when this, something resonated with them deeply, and that shifted the way they would, move forward, the action they'll take, the behavior they'll change, and that became a complete, repivoting of their whatever it is. Sometimes the ahas even may not be major. It's just the series of the small shifts that happen and put together, they create a huge impactful change for the client. And I was very energized about that, and
Yeah.
that was my driving force. And then when I experienced team coaching, I saw that now this same impact can be at a larger scale. Now
Uh-huh.
you can, if you shift the entire team, now the impact is cultural,
Right.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you work with an individual coach, if the whole system around them is not shifting,
Right.
their own evolution can actually be sometimes painful. They might come to this recognition that this is not the right place for them.
Mm-hmm.
But on the
Mm-hmm.
other hand, if we can expand the teams, now we have a bigger chance of impacting the culture.
That's right.
And so I got excited about how can I increase the impact. And then I do speaking and keynotes and facilitation, because I feel that people don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And then how do you fill the gaps? So I combine that to fill the gaps in the understanding so that the ahas can be even bigger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in that way, it seems like even just talking through with you, I am recognizing that there is a fit going on here. It may not be that obvious, but it's fitting. One is
Yes.
the impact at an individual level, the impact at a larger level, and the other one is to fill the gap.
Exactly. So I'm hearing that, when you do your speaking, that's where you're expanding people's awareness. So it's clearing the way and shining a bright light to expand awareness. And then when you go in to coach an individual or a team, you're helping them have get a higher impact out of the actions they choose and also in their work with you. And the impact on the team is the culture shifts, which allows for individuals to behave differently and have different ways they can perform than they did before. So they have more freedom. So that's from the outside in, the team inside. But then from the individual out, when they go in to work with their team, if they've done some work with you, what I'm hearing is they know how to choose activities and ways to perform that bring higher impact, things that are more meaningful for them, more meaningful to the work as far as results. And just, again, if you, wrap around this, that heightened awareness about what matters, because all of us at work can get kind of deep down into the weeds, and not realize the thing we're focusing on is not going to get us where we want to go, or we promised somebody we were going. And so you're raising awareness, you're increasing individual impact, and you're increasing team impact, which changes the culture, which again, it's like a big wheel. If you change the culture, that creates more room for an individual and a team to behave differently and get more impact than if they had stayed within their older habits. That's what I'm
Yeah.
hearing the connection is.
Yes, yes, yes. You so beautifully articulated it. Oh my God. So it is connected, and it's
It's
not,
connected.
I sense it that it's connected, but how you are, articulate it,
Yes.
it makes it very clear. And I think what you're saying is, once we are clear, then we can go to the next step. Then
That's
we can
right.
go to the how.
That's exactly right. And I worked with I actually, it wasn't a work, it was a conversation with a couple I know who are business partners, and they do amazing work together. And they thought they were bringing to the table something that was two different things that they wanted to do going forward. And, they are so clear and articulate that as they were talking, I said, actually, you're both doing the same business as you always have been, but one wants to participate in the digital side of it, and one wants to participate in a more analog side of it.
Mm.
But it's still the same thing. You're still working together, and it's so complementary. And it was fun to explore that with them. And it's perhaps my background in retail merchandising that helps me put, these things go together. This thing doesn't go there. But most of the time, I find my clients are suffering because they feel like, oh, all these things don't make sense.
Hmm.
There must be, one person even said to me, there must be something wrong with me that I have all these interests. I said, no, because they're all aligned, actually. It's like I can see conceptually, and even though you can't see it, somehow subconsciously, that's why you're drawn to it. It actually does all go together. It's exactly why, none of my clients have been crazy or so off base. It's just they couldn't see the connection between the things they were building from before to now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fun. It's fun. It's fun for me to see, because the other thing is my clients are usually pioneering something and creating a recipe that no one else has done before. So that's also, it's like, what do you call this category? It's like, well, we're going to have to name it. And then we're going to have to teach people what that means. And that's okay. Because I mean, I did that with consumer products and retail before when we tested new products. It's okay. People can handle it.
Yeah. It's, this actually, as you were saying this, I said, yeah, this all comes together, but then it gets to the next level of challenge, which is for who, right? So when all these different things come together, some can easily target a certain segment of audience, and other go at a corporate level. If I'm, doing, for example, uh, teams, then you are now looking at, you can't have individual clients and then find teams from that. And then when you go to facilitation, it's also different. And I'm wondering, have you ever heard of, a client come to you and say, well, I am struggling with my niche?
Yes. So first the niche problem could look like it's in the offering itself, which we just talked about. And then the other side of it is who's the audience for this and why do they care about it right now?
Yeah.
And timing is really interesting because being too early is just as bad as being too late.
Yeah.
When you're early, people are like, what are you talking about? Until and I think COVID really created a situation for us to accelerate what we were all talking about. I think there's a bigger need for there to be more ways teams can work together because of the different environments we're working from, the hybrid, the combo plate, everything. That wasn't really a concern in 2018 and 2019, right? Because it was a more predictable way that we all came together at work. But now, actually, those problems were starting to emerge as far as different styles, different generations in the workplace. And I think what COVID brought about was when the different environments and way that people started working together changed. It was like, oh, now everybody's listening. Now employers really want the answers and they're really interested in people like you who would change the culture and create openings for new things to happen. So back to the who's the audience, you got to figure out who cares about it. And sometimes when it's something new, you got to look for the early adopters, the ones who like to try new things. And they're not everybody. That's a smaller part of the audience. However, they're used to investing in their employees. They're used to investing in the future. And you have to find the industries that have the margin for that. And you have to find the leaders who care about that and have a history of doing it. So for example, targeting hospitality and restaurants and retail, for that kind of thing, the margins are so slim that they're really not, unfortunately, there's more of a turn and burn mentality around developing people. I don't even think that's a phrase being used anymore, just because of those thin margins. But you get into areas where people have to innovate, let's say it's medical devices that are being made for 5 to 10 years from now. Let's say it's technology that is being cultivated that's going to have some kind of a lifespan that's 0 to 20 years from now. Then you have leaders and talent development departments, so business leaders and talent development departments can both be concerned and want this kind of help, but they might articulate it in a different way. A business leader is usually right now we have this problem, we need to solve it because we promised we were going to deliver. So we need something to accelerate our progress. Talent development is more of it's running in the background all the time. We want to just keep upskilling everyone so that our people are more valuable in the future than they are right now. And we hope they'll choose to stay with us because we actually invested in them and gave them these tools in the toolbox. So back to that, who cares about it? You have to look for margins where they can afford to care. Second thing is you got to look at their commitments to the future, because usually when they're the farther out they're looking, the more they will invest. And then it gets down to the kind of people who would really do it. Sometimes you can have individuals sitting in departments where you say, that's the perfect candidate. They should want this. But if that person perhaps is sunsetting in her career, and she's not really wanting to set the world on fire on her way out, she may not want to go to all that trouble to bring in someone from the outside and start, an evolution. It's just a different kind of a thing. So there's a lot of boiling down from real external factors like margins and the industry trend and the pressure for the future. And then there's the real inside story, like who are these people and why do they care about it? Because we know you and I sat at that table that day and we saw how many people we knew in common. And all those people we know in common are dedicated to building other people's careers and helping. They're helpers, as we are helpers. So those are good referral partners and really good hirers of the kinds of skills that you bring to the table and the commitment you have to expanding awareness, evolving a culture, and increasing the impact that people have at work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think what you're saying is it's not going to happen organically, Anu. I was hoping that you'd say, okay, just keep doing your thing and it'll one day all come together. No, this
Yeah.
requires very deliberate, intentional um,
Yeah.
way of looking at it. It's like, the craft I have in coaching.
Yes.
I invest every year spending, a large, in first few years, it was a large chunk of what I earned. I'll put it back in my own education because I was in the corporate. And then I was shifting my careers 180 degrees, going to a brand new career. And I wanted to get all the training in the world and every single, lay my hand on every single tool. So I was just signing up for these courses one after another. And so it required a lot of dedication and deliberation. And I think what you're inviting is that, now to make it known and visible what you have, it requires deliberation also and very systematic approach.
That's right. You make decisions, you test some things, you evaluate what happened when you use that copy or you talk to those people and what happened. And the other thing that makes it hard, I think, for people to realize the investment they're going to make in business development is understanding how much time, like, 50% of your work time should be for billable hours. But the other 50% is for business development and administrative things. So that would be all around having time to do some outreach, to talk to people, meet with people. That's time to polish your skills so that you're relevant, you're using the right language, because that's another thing that's shifting is, the terms people use are starting to shift. So we want to make sure we're relevant and current with all our language. And that's why going to school, taking these courses, learning about different ways of doing things, they're so important because we got an audience. We've got 4 generations in the workplace right now who are all taking in information in a different way and are motivated in a very different way too.
But to be able to speak to the audience,
Yeah.
probably in 4 different ways to reach them.
Yes. And also to understand when it's like, okay, that wasn't my client prospect, like sometimes people say I lost the deal, and when they describe what happened, I go, well, I don't know if that was your deal to begin with, because I don't think that prospective client was really a prospect. In fact, sometimes I tease and say that was a suspect, not a prospect.
Oh, I love that.
Especially if my client's feeling bad. I'm like, if you feel that bad about it, it was not. Like, it just meant you were trying to make something happen that wasn't going to happen because it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense.
And
Yeah.
you spoke to me about this when we met over dinner, that casual chance meeting, which
Yeah.
turned out to be, such a blessing. And I remember you telling that, suspect versus a prospect. And that created such a huge mind shift for me. Because even though I've been in this business for 10 years now, I always tell people, oh, every time we are going through this chemistry meeting for coaching, there is this chemistry meeting. And if somebody didn't choose me, I I felt bad, right? I would judge myself, I'll critique myself. I really sometimes get my own worst enemy there. And that mind shift was really very interesting. Was it my client to begin with? If I had a choice, if I was doing it the other way around, would I said, you know, should I pick them up or not long term? Do they really connect with me at a level where this would be useful to them? And if if I take that, attitude, I would make a different choice.
Yes, it's so important to know that you can do some really good work and get results with and have an impact, as you're describing, with the right people. And it's not, everybody isn't for everybody.
Yes. So, shifting gears a little bit, there's something else you said which I wanted to go back to.
Mhm.
You have such interesting experiences. And again, in our conversation, you had mentioned about, how this experience in retail brings you a perspective which is very, very unique. Do
Mhm.
you want to talk about some of those experiences and how does it fit into the work you do, and how do you bring all of this into the business development work for your clients?
Oh man, I'm glad you asked about that. And I'm a note taker, so occasionally I'm going to lean over here and make a note. So promotion is a word, and timing, and what goes together. Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk about what goes together first. In retail, you're always merchandising. And so the idea is you present merchandise in a story, a way that a customer could recognize, if I buy this, here's what else goes with it. So it wouldn't matter if it was apparel or jewelry or even luggage. There are things that are put together in collections, and we can naturally see that in an ad where somebody's artfully put it together and photographed it on purpose. But when you go in a store, there could be a challenge with fixtures. And in the old days, I mean, like, in the 70s, they were still commoditizing different categories. Here are all the blouses, here are all the skirts, here, whatever. But there started to be a change at that time where designer collections started to emerge. And so a designer was all about lifestyle. So if you're, wearing this jacket, you probably wear this coordinating blouse, and you put together these accessories, and you've got a look here, here comes Ralph Lauren or anybody else, where the whole vibe is a look, and it's not about randomly choosing a blouse from a stack of blouses and etc. So the idea of knowing how to put things together. So I was at a young age, I was 16 when I began in retail on the selling floor. And my manager was a very gruff, kind of a tough person. And she would, Miss Grundy. And people would say, oh, you're a Grundy girl. She's so tough. She was an amazing teacher and really good at, I have to say, her 3 departments that she managed, we were all well trained because she had very high expectations for us. So she also was really gifted at saying, oh, you're good at, and for me, she goes, would you please redo all the displays? When you're here, after, when it's quiet between customers, and I would do the displays, not because I'm a designer, but because I had a way of pulling together looks that the customer would see and then buy, because I was suggested, right? So this is, later on in life when I was a buyer, I was also had to buy collections and do product development, actually design collections and like photo frames, no, totally different discipline. But what happens is I start understanding I'm an associative thinker, and that I can see the connection between why these things go together. And it's not just about color, and it's not just about fabric, but it's the idea or the feeling of it. And so that works for me in my job now, because when a client describes these various things and cannot see the connection, I generally can. I mean, and I'm not saying because I make it up, it has to make some logical sense. There is a saying in advertising, without the logic, nobody will believe you. And without the magic, no one will care.
Mm.
And I can attribute that, actually. That's Gary Goldsmith. He said that. And it's you got to have a balance of why it makes sense. The person would thinks it makes sense to buy it, whether it's a service or a product, but it's also got to have some magic, like, oh, this combination of things is unique. I won't find it anywhere else, whether it's consumer products or whether it's a bundle of services from someone who promises a very important impact, but it comes packaged up in a way that's different. So I'd say from my retail career, that's how I brought that forward. I realized I'm an associative thinker. It comes in very, very handy with the work with professional service providers, just as it did in retail. The idea of timing, I mentioned earlier already that, being too early is just as bad as being too late. Like when you're a buyer and you buy product and you buy too much and it's left over and there are markdowns, nobody's happy in management for sure. Um, and if you're too early and it sits there and you have to mark it down, nobody's happy about that either. So it doesn't matter. Like people sometimes are like, I'm pioneering this. I want to be the only one doing this. And I say, that's expensive. I'm not saying it can't be done, but being the first is hard. You could miss the timing completely, or it could just be expensive. And then the idea of promotion, knowing what aspect of what to promote. So for example, is it about placement, showing up? Like I'll give you another retail lesson. I worked with a small manufacturer that was selling products in a real commoditized space. They were selling children's really upscale clothing that was hand loomed, in the Appalachian Mountains. And they sold it really successfully because they sold it in the high-end gift departments of small retail stores. So there it stood out. Basically, grandma's shopping and she's got a different budget than, let's say, mom and dad have. And so she's buying things for her home, but she sees something wonderful for a grandchild, and I'll buy that $60 infant sweater type of thing. Well, this manufacturer decided, let's go into the children's market and really show up there with all the other children's clothing manufactured. It was a problem because then it was a commodity. It was like, why does your sweater cost $60 when there's a $20 one here that's perfectly fine? So knowing how to promote something so that it stands out and it's distinctive, and so that it also still has to have that logic magic situation that makes sense as well. So knowing where to show up. If you're in the wrong venue or you're talking to the wrong people, that can cause you problems, but it doesn't mean that you've got the wrong service. It just meant wrong audience. So that's the idea of promotion or placement. So those are 3 things from my retail career that translate really well to what I'm doing now.
It's fascinating, Lenora. The whole, I can go on listening to your retail stories because the experience is fascinating, and how it's translated into your work today is even more fascinating. So thanks for sharing that.
My
And I for
pleasure. Thanks.
sure I'm going to listen to this because I have the recording, and we'll post it, and so I have the opportunity to listen to it again and again. And there's just such brilliant nuggets in it for us to take on and see how to even think about when we go out and do maybe not calling it selling, but how do we show. See, calling it selling itself is hard for me. Could you see that my hesitation
Yes,
in
I
saying the word
can.
selling? Or
I
you
can.
heard
And
that?
you know what? I'll give you okay. I'm so glad you said this, because you're right. A lot of people, as the words come out, there's like it sticks in their throat, the selling and sales. I like to think of it as marketing. And you know what happens when you do a great job with marketing, which is very strategic, by the way? Sales just become a natural thing that comes out of great marketing. It's like you don't have to, it's like inviting people to a party. If you do all the right things to set up for the party, when people get there, they're going to relax and have a good time. So you don't have to tell people when they come to the party, now start talking, start drinking, start eating. You don't have to tell people that, right? Because if you've done it right, you've set the tone and the scene for it by even the way you sent the invitation, or the way you arranged the furniture and the kind of food you selected, and even the kind of people you have there to mix together because they have great chemistry. So I would love to see people thinking about, maybe we take the sales word out, the S word, and we make it, just marketing. And because marketing is, like I said, it's a very strategic activity that's fun. And then sales just is like a natural execution point on really good marketing.
Yeah,
Could
that
be.
makes sense. The F word becomes the M word.
That's right.
And also, and when you're also talking on marketing, but being very clear on what's the offering, who is it for? You said what and the how.
Yeah.
So what is it we bring, and how do we bring it to others?
Yes. And it is interesting as far as the who, because a lot of times I'm very flattered to be invited to create messaging, whether it's for a website or sometimes my clients and I are preparing them for a meeting. There might be a role play and just thinking about talking points. And sometimes, or an email that's going out. And I can always tell when there's too big of an audience, because I'll say, well, wait a minute. I always start with who is it? Like, even if they're telling me I'm talking to this prospect, I go, well, let's look them up on LinkedIn. Let's look at their background. Let's look at what they care about, how they talk about themselves. And so when I go back to the broad messaging, sometimes I'm like, well, it's going to be a big audience, going to include all these people. And I said, well, it's really hard to craft messaging for a real homogenous generic group, because we're going to end up saying things that are meaningless to most of them. So it's probably better to break down our group into smaller groups and having messaging for each one. And yes, is it labor intensive to market ourselves? Yes, it is. It's strategic, it's labor intensive, but it's not headbanging. It just requires some thought and intention, as you said earlier.
And thought and intention brings us back to where we started from, mindfulness. And what I've seen is how you approach this work is just so holistic. And you talked about that, right? It's the inner world and the outer world. And we talked about your outer world, which is like how you're helping the clients. But there is an inner world to you, which is your values and your experiences and your own practices, which bring the whole of you.
Yes.
And I wonder, how do you make that happen? Or does it come naturally? You are made to be this.
I do think I'm made to be doing this job that I made up for myself. I can't seem to find any way to not do it, right? It's like some of my clients have said to me, please keep me from doing this for free, because I want to do it so badly, right? So mindfulness, I studied in a school for a few years when I lived in San Francisco. And this was in the 90s, a long time ago, before mindfulness was really being talked about in the mainstream as it is now. Thank goodness. So meditation was part of my life early on. I remember in high school reading a book about creative visualization by Shakti Gawain. And so the idea of perfectly picturing what you want the outcome to be, which, by the way, comes in handy when you're doing retail planning, but whether you're planning a layout of a store floor or a buy for the next season, or now with my clients, I say, well, let's do, a straw dog, where we kind of predict, to get to this total number of revenue, how many gigs you're going to do of what size. And then that kind of helps us, that helps us focus on, well, where do you need to show up to end up meeting the people who would buy those price points and those services the way we described? So visualization, meditation, being really clear, because I think another thing from retail I learned was when you communicate with the general public, you've got all kinds of people from all kinds of, walks of life and different things going on in their day. And so when somebody comes in and asks you for something and your job is to help them, you have to zero in on what is it you want? Why do you want it? When do you want it? And then, that's how you, again, present the solution, whether it's a product or let me get someone to help you. So I think being clear and hearing what's going on, what's really going on for people, what really matters, that always seemed glaringly apparent to me, especially because when you work with the general public, you also find out pretty quickly when you're wrong, right? So you learn to read the room faster and faster and to ask better questions, so that, and even I always joke around about state the obvious, like, I really want to help you, saying things like that to someone. I hear you really need this. I want to help you. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, not to give you a hard time, but because I'm really trying to get you what you need. And I learned that was another thing I learned to do. So the poor person didn't feel like they had to defend themselves for asking for something. I think it's important with my clients now too, is to not have them feel interrogated because I'm curious and trying to walk all around something and make sure I get it. It's just, people are complicated. What we're doing is complex. I think it's important to make sure I really hear it. See it.
making your intentions clear, making the invisible visible, going under the surface to find out, what their real intention is, what do they really, really want, and, then, be able to approach it from that.
Yes.
By the
Yeah.
way, I also love Creative Visualization by Shakti Gwan. I think it's one of the best books ever. I've used it on myself. I have, helped walk a lot of clients through their own visualization uh, using that book. It's a huge resource for me.
I'm glad to hear it. It's I'm so grateful. It wasn't part of a class that I was taking. I had a wonderful teacher who just said, I think you might like this book. And you can read it. You know, it wasn't even part of my schoolwork or getting a grade. It was just somebody who noticed my curiosity. I don't even know what prompted it, but I'm so grateful that I got to read that as a teenager. I mean, I was probably 16. It was amazing.
Lenora, you've given us a lot of great tips and tools to think about. And then, as we end today's podcast, is there anything else you'd want to say or, share before we end?
I'm I'm thinking about this visualization thing because there's and mindfulness, and I'm thinking of the faith component. There was a time in my life when I worked with a yogi. He happened to be a psychologist also, so he was my therapist. And it was right after 9/11 when, the world was scary. We had something really different happen. I mean, just like we just experienced the pandemic. And it was hard for me to go back to my normal, what it felt like typical goal setting ways when the world felt very different. And he helped me understand how important it was to have faith and he said it, I guess I was being very difficult one day, and he said, gee whiz, when your mother showed you how to tie your shoes, did you question that? This is how your shoes get tied, so learn it. And he said, sometimes when you're building something new, and at that point I was building a different phase of my business, he said, you're going to have to have faith, Lenora, that it's going to work. So that means you design it, and you picture it, and you affirm it, and you visualize it. And, you're making plans, that's important, but you're also taking in new data and making different decisions. You have free will. But he said, you have to have a certain faith that it's going to work out. And I have noticed that my clients who have that kind of underlying faith that it's going to work out, they do better than the ones who are concerned that they're going to make one wrong move and it's all going to go down the drain, and so I think there is as a part of mindfulness, and there's the visualization component where we project ourselves forward, but then there's the faith that maybe that grinds us and grounds us, excuse me, not grinds us, grounds us. And it doesn't have to be a religious faith, it's just a faith in something, yourself, this business, this whatever it is, but an idea that it's going to end up great. And it just might take some twists and turns along the way that you have to pay attention to, and perhaps make some different decisions. But overall, it's going to be all right. And he taught me that in 2001, and it has made my life better and business great. And I enjoy myself a lot more because I'm not peering over the edge of the cliff wondering what's going to happen. It's like I have my equipment, and I'm using my tools, and I've surrounded myself with people who have the same values I do. And so it's all going to be good. We're building something together.
I love that. I love that. I call the faith also magic. So there is a little room for magic here.
I love it. I love hearing that.
Oh, but yeah, I think we all, without faith, we would be um a society of, cynics.
Right. Right. And you cannot be a cynical person and have a business. It doesn't go together at all.
There
It
is
doesn't.
some level of optimism, faith, magic, and that's needed.
And the desire for things to be better.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of us started businesses. I think I can improve the condition. So there is one more thing, over time, people have said to me, I bet you love that show Shark Tank. And I'm like, I actually don't like that show, because what I believe I believe it creates an impression on Americans who are watching it, that, oh, business is, it's only those multi-million billion-dollar ideas. And if you don't have one of those ideas, something Mark Cuban would want to invest in, it's not a good idea. So you might as well work for someone else. It's like, wait a minute. There are plenty of us thousandaires running around here, supporting our families, paying our mortgages, doing things that everyday people need to do. And it just has to, the business has to have the impact you want, the impact, the results, the impact meaning the kind of people who you help, the impact being what you get out of it as far as your compensation to make sure you can feed yourself. But it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yeah, yeah. You said something at the very beginning. So for you, what drives you was creating positive impact in the world. And you're inviting all of us to do that
Yes.
we can all do that. And I mean, everybody who works even outside their business, but definitely in their business, right? It doesn't have to be big, major Shark Tank like idea. It can be smaller ideas and yet can make a positive impact on the world.
Yes,
So
definitely. Yeah, it's our life's work. I mean, that's why it's so important every day to do it.